When the princess was living among the commoners, she once worked as a maid in my household. My parents treated her with kindness, but after she returned to the palace, she tried to erase the shame of once having served as a slave by seizing our family's assets, killing my parents, turning my brother into a eunuch, and reducing me to a mere foot-washing maid. After dying in misery, I was reborn on the very day she was officially recognized as part of the imperial family. Right in front of her, I clung to the emperor's leg and cried out, "Father, I finally found you." 1. I was reborn on the day Ming Rue was acknowledged by the imperial family. The agony of having my flesh sliced off bit by bit still felt real. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw Ming Rue standing meekly at my bedside, asking, "Miss, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare?" I was so terrified I quickly pulled the blanket over my head. That look in her eyes, so full of envy and resentment. How had I missed it in my past life? In the beginning, Ming Rue was just a beggar. She was being harassed while begging on the streets, and my father, unable to stand by and do nothing, brought her home to serve as my personal maid. We were the same age. Back then, I was carefree and playful, and seeing her made me happy. I treated her like a real sister. Even my brother, because of me, regarded her as a sibling and never left her out of any fun we had. Later, the emperor issued a decree seeking out a lost member of the royal family. That's when we found out Ming Rue was actually a royal descendant who had been separated from the palace. She was taken back to the imperial court, and we were all genuinely happy for her. But then, one by one, the emperor's other 3 princesses met with accidents, and Ming Rue became the sole remaining princess. The emperor lavished all his affection on her. I never imagined that the first thing she would do after being cloaked in honor and status was turn her sword on my Yin family. She started by making up a charge and confiscated all our property. My parents fell ill from the blow and never recovered. Then, she took a liking to my brother's looks and wanted him as her companion. When he refused, she had him sent to be castrated. As for me, she dragged me into the palace and made me the lowest of the low, a foot-washing maid. One day, the water was slightly too hot. She stomped on my face and ordered her people to slice the flesh off my face, one piece at a time. Right before I died, I asked her in despair, "Why are you doing this?" Ming Rue smiled viciously and said, "Did you enjoy having me serve you back then? A noble princess tending to you. Were you satisfied?" So that was it. Everything she did was to erase the fact that she'd once been a slave. But if it weren't for our family, she would have died on the streets that day, harassed by thugs. Our kindness to her had been the start of our downfall. Luckily, I was reborn. This time, I won't let any of it happen again. When Ming Rue stepped forward to help me get dressed, I instinctively avoided her hand. Letting you dress me once cost me a slice of flesh. No thanks, I'm not that lucky. Ming Rue, mother loves the osmanthus cakes from West Street. Go buy her some, would you? She nodded and replied politely before leaving. I waited until she had stepped out the front gate before scrambling to get dressed and bolting for the street. There's a back alley off East Street. People there will do anything if the price is right. I slammed all my savings on their table and said urgently, "I need you to kidnap someone. Right now. Sell her as far away as humanly possible." The man in charge hefted my money pouch and asked, "How far do you want her taken?" I blurted out the farthest place I could think of. Loose City. Once the deal was sealed, I walked out of the alley, finally letting out a breath. But just then, I overheard some passers-by having tea and chatting nearby. I heard His Majesty sent envoys to Loose City to look for someone, apparently one of the royal blood, who was lost among the commoners. I skidded to a halt, spun around, and snatched my money pouch back. Forget it. Deal's off. 2. In my past life, I was raised with endless love for my parents and brother. I hadn't even killed a bird. But now, no matter where Ming Rue goes, the emperor could still find her. If she regains her status as a princess, our whole family is doomed. I had no choice. I had to go all the way and kill her. I left the alley and went straight to the pharmacy. 1 packet of arsenic, please. At the same time, a man beside me said the exact same words. I turned my head and locked eyes with Yun Qianli. Brother? Jiang Rong. He yanked me aside, frowning. Why aren't you staying home? What are you doing running around? Listen to me. Where's Ming Rue? Whatever you do, don't let her leave the house these next few days. He rambled on, and suddenly a wild thought struck me. Brother, don't tell me, you were reborn too? Too. He stared at me, stunned. We stood there in silence. Eventually, we walked home with 2 packets of arsenic. Back in the study, we plotted in secret. I asked him, how did you die in our past life after I was tortured to death? Yun Qianli's eyes widened. You were tortured to death? Wait, he didn't know? Turns out he'd been beaten to death with clubs by eunuchs, wrapped in a straw mat, days before I died. Yun Qianli was shaking with rage. How could she be so cruel? I sighed. Thankfully, it's not too late to change things now. Yun Qianli had a big pot of mung bean soup prepared, saying it was to help the servants cool off in the summer heat, and left a bowl aside for Ming Rue, who was out. He took out the arsenic and was about to sprinkle it in. I quickly stopped him. Wait. He frowned slightly. Having second thoughts? I pulled out the second packet from my sleeve. I'm just afraid one won't be enough. Let's use both. Yun Qianli nodded. Just as we stirred the poison in, we suddenly heard Ming Rue's voice at the front gate. Help! Someone come quickly. I carried the soup out and saw Ming Rue supporting a middle-aged man in rough, plain clothes. My eyes went wide, and I nearly forgot how to breathe. This was exactly how it happened last time. She brought the emperor, who was traveling in disguise, home. When he noticed their similar facial features, he grew suspicious. After some investigating, he realized she was his daughter. Fate's twisted gears were spinning again, damn it. Ming Rue anxiously said, Miss, this gentleman collapsed on the roadside. I think it's heat stroke. Let's help him. She reached for the bowl of mung bean soup in my hands. This soup. I raised my hand and dumped it out. It's gone bad. What do you take me for? Like I dare poison the emperor. Now that things had come to this, I had no choice but to help my brother settle the emperor into a guest room. As soon as he woke up, the first thing he asked was to see Ming Rue. I stood by, watching him stare at Ming Rue with emotion in his eyes. You look just like her.
How old are you?
When were you born? Ming Rue lowered her head. I'm 18 this year. I was born on the 7th day of the 3rd lunar month. Yes, that's the right age. Tears welled up in the emperor's eyes. He trembled as he lifted Ming Rue up. I finally, before he could finish, I dropped to my knees with a thud and clutched his leg, bawling. I finally found you. Father. 3. The emperor froze. Ming Rue froze. I shoved Ming Rue aside and cried my heart out. Do you remember Lin Haitang from the prince's manor? That's my mother. Father, I've finally found you. Ming Rue didn't remember much from her childhood. Most of what she knew came from the emperor after she was brought back to the palace. And to flaunt her superiority, she always made me kneel and listen while she recounted it. In other words, I knew all the details better than she did. So, why couldn't I be the princess? Tears still streaming down my face, I glanced at Ming Rue from the corner of my eye. She stood there frozen, pale as a ghost. You're spouting nonsense. My father's voice rang from the doorway. Not good. He was red with anger. Your real father isn't even dead yet. Why are you in such a rush to find a new one? Before I could respond, Yun Qianli walked in holding a jade pendant, knelt in front of our father, and said, Father, I know it's hard for you to let go of sister, but they're the real family. Look, this is the half of the jade pendant sister was wearing when she collapsed outside our house as a child. It's identical to the one this gentleman has. My brother's sharp. He must have stolen Ming Rue's keepsake. Father was stunned. And at that moment, Ming Rue finally realized the man was her real father, and Yun Qianli and I were trying to steal her identity. She clutched the emperor's robes, sobbing. This pendant is mine. My mother gave it to me. I'm your daughter. She turned to me. "Miss, why are you doing this?" I cried even harder than she did. Why would I lie? I lived a life of luxury under Lord Yun's roof. But look at him, passed out in the street with no family in sight. If he weren't really my father, why would I pretend to be someone else's daughter from such a poor background? What I said made a lot of sense. The whole room fell silent. Ming Rue just stood there, too shocked to figure out why I'd impersonate her. She just kept shaking her head. As for my father, he smacked himself across the face, frowned, and muttered, This isn't a dream, is it?" The Emperor's eyes darted between me and Ming Rue, clearly deep in thought. Just then, a group of palace guards burst into the house and dropped to their knees in unison. I put on an act of surprise, pretending I had no idea who the Emperor really was. Even though I had the jade pendant and Yun Qianli backing up my story, Ming Rue really did resemble the Emperor. In the end, he decided to bring both of us back to the palace. He would investigate carefully to determine who his real daughter was. If I'm going to face a blade either way, I might as well bet it all. That title of princess? It's mine now. 4. After we entered the palace, we were placed in adjacent bedchambers. On the very first day, over a dozen eunuchs and palace maids came to serve us. That night, just before bedtime, the head eunuch arrived to deliver a decree. I was to rest well, because the next day, a senior palace matron would come to perform a physical examination. I nodded calmly, but I knew the truth. The so-called physical examination was just a cover. They were actually coming to check for a birthmark. Ming Rue had a red, flame-shaped birthmark on her back. The old matron the Emperor summoned was almost certainly the same one who delivered her at birth. I hadn't expected a challenge this early. I spent half the night pacing my room, finally coming up with a plan. The next morning, the old matron came from Ming Rue's chambers, her voice full of smugness. "I've served in the palace for decades. This is the first time I've heard of anyone daring to impersonate a princess. I must see for myself who has such gall." She had obviously already seen the birthmark on Ming Rue and assumed without question that she was the real princess. I stepped out with unsteady steps, my exposed skin burning, as if on fire. The old woman recoiled in shock. "What happened to you?" I spoke, as if I were struggling to breathe. "Last night I was fine, but when I woke up this morning, I don't know what happened. I broke out in a rash." She took me into my chamber alone and lifted my clothes. What she saw was a red mess. There was no way to tell whether there was a birthmark or not. The old woman froze. She could confirm that Ming Rue had a birthmark, but she couldn't say for certain that I didn't. Unsure what to do, she had no choice but to report back to the Emperor with the facts. To everyone's surprise, as soon as the Emperor heard I had an allergic reaction, he came to my quarters himself. Allergy? To what? I looked weak and frail, pitiful and delicate. I don't really know. I think it's the apricot blossoms in the courtyard. As soon as I smell them, I can't breathe. The Emperor's expression shifted. His gaze seemed to pass right through me, as if seeing someone else. He murmured under his breath. She was allergic to apricot blossoms too. That she was Ming Rue's birth mother, Lin Haidang. It happened over 20 years ago. Back when the Emperor was still a prince, she had been the most talented dancer in his residence. During a spring banquet surrounded by apricot blossoms, her skin had flared up in a striking rash from the allergy, so beautiful it had made her famous throughout the capital. There was no way this was just a coincidence. Of course, I wasn't actually allergic. I had secretly eaten a huge bowl of peanuts the night before. But to the Emperor, this was clearly proof of a genetic link. So he immediately ordered every apricot tree in the courtyard chopped down, summoned the best imperial physician from the Royal Medical Bureau to care for me, and even sent for my family to come into the palace. He wanted to thoroughly investigate the past shared between me and Ming Rue while we were living at the Yun estate. The day before my parents were summoned, I ran into Ming Rue in the imperial garden. In just a few short days, she seemed to have transformed, draped in an exquisite silk gown, adorned with pearls and jade. When she saw me, all her former meekness was gone, replaced with venom in her expression. Yun Jiangrong, Don't think you can bluff your way through this with a simple allergic reaction. A fake is still a fake. Once you're better, the matron will see the truth. I gave her a pitiful look. I don't understand why you're pretending to be me, but I have a clear conscience. Ming Rui was so angry she stomped and crushed a patch of flowers. Everything she could think of, I had already thought of too. So when our parents were summoned, my brother disguised himself as a eunuch and secretly brought me something.
5.
This is a salve I bought in the alley, he said. Rub it on your skin and it'll turn red, just like a birthmark. I hesitated. I heard our parents were summoned separately. My brother patted my hand, reassuringly. Don't worry. I already explained everything to them. As crazy as the whole past life story sounded, our parents trusted us. Once they heard that our family would die at Ming Rui's hands, they made the decisive choice to help us play along. My brother couldn't stay long in the inner palace, so as he was about to leave, I grabbed his arm. Do you remember the rebellion that breaks out in 6 months? He paused, surprised. What about it? I frowned slightly. If our family wants a real chance at survival, we need to hold power in our hands. You should go to the military camp. That's where we can turn things around. Backlit by the sun, my brother gave me a bright smile. Don't worry. You hold your ground in the palace. I've got your back out here. Once I recovered, the old matron came to visit again. When she saw the flame-shaped birthmark on my back, she was completely stunned. Since our bodies showed no differences now, the emperor began looking for other ways to distinguish between us. Not long after, we heard that a spring hunting event was to be held. All the princesses, except for the most favored imperial consort, would be participating. The spring air was lovely, but tension brewed beneath the surface of the hunting party. The emperor looked proudly at his children. Our royal ancestors conquered this land on horseback. Today, you'll ride and hunt. Whoever brings back the most game shall be greatly rewarded. This was my first time seeing the other princesses. The domineering and arrogant first princess. The gentle and elegant second princess. And then there was one wearing faded old clothes, struggling awkwardly with a thin horse led by a servant. People whispered that she was the third princess, daughter of a palace maid. She was never favored, and even the servants dared to bully her. I quietly observed them. This hunt was a chance for them to impress the emperor. But for Ming Rui and me, it was another test. In the north, where livestock were plentiful, almost all girls could ride horses. If we had grown up in the north, we would definitely know how. Southern girls, by contrast, almost never learned. Sure enough, Ming Rui shot me a provocative glance, then mounted her horse. She was a bit stiff, but it was clear she knew how to ride. The emperor's eyes lit up with delight. The very next second, he looked at me. I met the surrounding gazes, ran a hand along the horse's back, and mounted it in one clean, fluid motion. Gasps erupted all around. Ming Rui's face turned pale with fury. I couldn't help but smirk. She never would have guessed. Long before she came to our house, my brother had already taught me how to ride. He was an expert in mounted archery, which is exactly why I wanted him in the military camp. The hunting party began to disperse, with everyone riding into the forest. As I passed by, I gave a hand to the struggling third princess, who was still trying to mount her horse. She looked stunned, then whispered a soft, "Thank you." The forest was vast. We didn't see each other again during the hunt. But when we returned to camp, there was a new face. A nervous-looking woman in coarse, simple clothing. 6. The emperor summoned both me and Ming Rui into a tent. Do either of you know who this woman is? I glanced at the woman. Her skin was tanned and rough, clearly someone who did hard labor. Before I could react, Ming Rui had already stepped forward and warmly wrapped her arms around the woman's arm. Auntie Wang, what are you doing here? You must be exhausted from traveling all the way from the north. The emperor gave me a cryptic look and said, she was Haitong's neighbor in the north. If you're really Haitong's daughter, you would have been 8 when you left the north. Surely you remember her. I paused. When I looked up again, my eyes were already brimming with tears. I just never expected to see a familiar face in a place like this. Then I slowly walked toward the woman, tears running down my face. Annie Wong. I left the north the year my mother died. It's been 10 years now. How have you been? Ming Rue gave a cold snort. Yun Jiangrong, anyone can say that kind of thing. Stop pretending already. Auntie Wong looked confused. 2 Jiao years? What's going on here? Ming Rue had gone by the nickname Jiao before entering the Yun household. Now, feeling completely in control, she looked at me like I was already dead. You're done for, Yun Jiangrong. If you really know Auntie Wong, then tell me, what's her full name? The Emperor and Auntie Wong both turned to look at me. I wiped my tears and looked at Auntie Wong with a teary smile. Auntie Wong, you always complained that the name Wong Yu sounded unpleasant. It's been years, did you ever change it? Auntie Wong's eyes flew open. She looked at me with delight and broke into a smile. Jiao, it really is you. She hugged me like a long-lost relative, her hands gently stroking my back. I added, Huzi must be 16 by now, right? When I left, he was clutching my sleeve, crying his heart out. I promised to buy him candied hawthorn, but I never got the chance. Tears welled up in Annie Wong's eyes. That boy misses you dearly. Who would have thought you'd never return once you left? The Emperor looked at me with a complicated expression, as though trying to piece something together. Ming Rue staggered back in disbelief, screaming, No. That's impossible. I'm Jiao. She lunged forward to strangle me. Who are you? Why are you pretending to be me? How do you know all these things? Why do you know Auntie Wong? She was in a full-blown frenzy. The Emperor shouted furiously. Enough! He ordered the palace maids to restrain her. I held my neck, coughing. Because I am Jiao. I knew Auntie Wong long before, and you only know of her because I told you about her. Ming Rue began screaming like a madwoman. And as I watched her spiral into despair, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. And I hadn't lied, not about that. Auntie Wong and I truly had known each other in our past lives. 7. In my previous life, once Ming Rue reclaimed her status as princess, the first thing she did was take revenge on my Yun family. Then she turned on our old neighbors from the north, Auntie Wong's family. Back then, the north was chaotic, with starvation everywhere. Ming Rue and her mother often went without food. Auntie Wong would share whatever she had, leftover steamed buns or wild greens. But food spoils quickly, and what Ming Rue remembered was that Auntie Wong's family got to eat white flour buns while her family only got spoiled vegetables. That planted the seed of hatred. Once she became a princess, she had Auntie Wong thrown into prison. They only fed her moldy leftovers every day. If she threw up, they'd beat her with sticks. I was the servant assigned to deliver her food. To scare me, Ming Rue would recount what crimes Auntie Wong had supposedly committed, then ask, Missy, I served you like a dog for 10 years. You're worse than she is. Tell me, what should your punishment be? I was terrified. I couldn't sleep at night. Auntie Wong would find ways to talk to me when she saw me crying. She'd tell me about her hometown, her son Huzi, and her memories of Ming Rue. We both had the same question. Why had our kindness become the very weapon that destroyed us? So now, when I see Auntie Wong's tears, I know they're real. I'm grateful to have been reborn. Grateful that I'm still alive. And that kind, gentle Auntie Wong is too. After Ming Rue lost control in front of the Emperor and had a complete breakdown, she was confined to her chambers. As for me, the opposite happened. Rewards came pouring into my residence. Other than the official title of princess, everything I ate, wore, and used was no different from a real one. One day, a group of eunuchs carried in a glass screen gifted by the Emperor. I handed out silver as usual. I overheard a few of them gossiping. This whole fake and real princess situation is so strange. His Majesty clearly favors Miss Yun, so why hasn't he officially named her princess? And why hasn't he punished Ming Rue? Why is she still being treated so well? To be honest, I found it strange too. Ming Rue lived close by, and lately, I'd often hear her screaming in madness. She probably thought I'd won already, and that drove her to rage and fear. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered past her residence. There, in the cold winter air, a palace maid knelt in the snow, soaked to the bone, shivering violently. I asked, "What happened?" The maid trembled even harder when she saw me. "I upset the mistress, she made me kneel out here." Ming Rue had grown more violent since entering the palace. Her true nature, once hidden, was now on full display. I sighed and quietly draped my cloak over the maid. "Wear this. If you really don't need it, sell it outside the palace. It's not worth much, but it'll cover a few doses of medicine." The maid stared at me for a long time, then dropped to her knees and bowed deeply. I've never been the kind of person who goes around helping others for no reason. But I knew this maid. In my previous life, when Ming Rue tormented me and left me to starve, this girl had once secretly given me half a steamed bun. Annie Wong was kind and ended up with her whole family destroyed. I couldn't let that happen again. Kindness is not the sin it never was. I said no more and turned to leave. But just as I did, the maid suddenly said, "Miss Yun, your cloak, it's beautifully made. Exactly like our mistress's." I froze. This cloak was made from the finest fabric by the palace's best embroiderer, extravagantly expensive. If Ming Rue was supposedly being punished, cast aside, why would she still have access to something like this? The maid had just given me a warning, and from that moment on, I became much more cautious.
8.
The emperor continued to lavish me with gifts and honors for several months. One day after court, he even came to visit me personally. He didn't stay long, his mind seemed elsewhere, and left shortly after arriving. I quietly sent someone to follow him. Turns out, he stopped outside Ming Rue's residence and stood there for a long while, his expression complicated. That look was clearly one of lingering affection. All of this told me one thing: the emperor was planning something. Soon after, word of successive defeats on the border came through. The brutal tribes of Bienrong sent envoys to negotiate and demanded a political marriage. The day before the banquet to receive them, the emperor personally ordered me to attend. He said he would announce to the world that he had found his long-lost daughter. Then I saw the gown he had prepared for me, resplendent and extravagant, and everything clicked. He wanted me to stand out at the banquet in front of the Bienrong envoy, which was basically suicide. The king of Bienrong was infamous for his cruelty. He'd already married 7 wives, none of whom had survived more than 6 months. So the emperor had already confirmed Ming Rue was his daughter. He'd just kept it to himself, waiting for this moment to push me, his fake daughter, into a marriage alliance to save his real princesses. It made sense. I had taken up the role of princess on a whim. Maybe I'd slipped up somewhere along the way. And that dog of an emperor, he'd held it in all this time, never letting on. To deceive everyone, even his own daughter. Truly cold-hearted. He was scheming against me? Then I wouldn't let him get his way. I told the maids to dress me in the imperial gown, styled myself to perfection, and made a point of strolling to Ming Rue's quarters. Before I even got close, I heard her shouting and cursing at her servants. I stood at the door with a smile. "Keep hitting them. If you don't act tough today, you won't get another chance." Ming Rue stomped in fury, trying to lunge at me. The maids held her back as she screamed, "You bitch! Why did you impersonate me? I'm the princess." "Me." I gave a little twirl in my exquisite gown. "Pretty, isn't it? Father gave it to me. He also said that tomorrow, he'll publicly declare I'm his daughter. Ming Rue, after tomorrow, I'm the princess."
You?
"You're just a criminal guilty of high treason. Your death is coming." Ming Rue's face went deathly pale. She trembled all over, hatred burning in her eyes. I leaned in and whispered near her ear, "The maids who dressed me today were so clumsy, not like you. You were better."
Ah.
"You bitch. I'll kill you." Ming Rue snapped, tears pouring down her face in rage. I smirked and turned to walk away, leaving her screams behind me. A little palace maid escorted me out. I stopped beside her, hesitated, and asked softly, "I need your help. Will you do it?"
9.
The next day, the palace hosted a grand banquet to welcome the Bienrong envoy. I subtly glanced at the other princesses. They were all dressed plainly, looking pale and frail. Only I wore fine silks and elaborate makeup. Seated in the center, I looked like a peacock in full display, completely unmissable. Just as I expected, the envoy's leering eyes never once left me. The emperor observed his reaction, then raised his cup with a pleased smile. "This is my youngest daughter. What does the envoy think of her?" The envoy nodded eagerly. "Stunning. Even the most beautiful woman in Bienrong would pale beside the princess." Then he stood and clasped his hands in greeting. "For this marriage alliance, I would like to formally request." But before he could finish, music suddenly filled the hall. A graceful figure, draped in gauzy silk, stepped into the hall and began to dance with the rhythm. Everyone gasped. The dancer was Ming Rue. Her movements were elegant, captivating, radiant, and full of life. When the dance ended, the entire hall fell into stunned silence. The emperor's face darkened. He slammed his hand on the table. Absurd. But the envoy was entranced. "That dance was extraordinary. What's it called?" Ming Rue, eyes glistening with tears, knelt gracefully. "It's called the Green Waist Dance. My mother created it herself. She only ever taught it to me." Her gaze locked onto the emperor's, filled with silent emotion. He frowned deeply, his face unreadable. Meanwhile, I raised my wine cup to hide the smile twitching at the corners of my lips. 2 lifetimes' worth of experience told me. Ming Rue was impulsive, hot-tempered, and fiercely proud. After what I said to her, of course, she'd be desperate to prove she was the real princess. And she had to do it at the most important event. All I had to do was plant the idea. I told the palace maids to accidentally talk about how Lin Haidang once stunned the capital with her green waist dance. Ming Rue took the bait perfectly. But what she didn't realize, grabbing the spotlight at this banquet was the worst thing she could do. For me, though, it was fantastic. She outshone me completely. Thinking I was drowning my sorrows in wine, Ming Rue walked up and whispered, "That was father's favorite dance. He knows my mother's dance better than anyone, he won't mistake me. Let's see if you're still smiling after today." I nearly burst out laughing. My thigh had a bruise from pinching myself to hold it in. Soon after, news spread like wildfire. The Bienrong envoy had requested to marry Ming Rue. He was so impressed by her dance that the Bienrong king couldn't wait to have her as his bride. Ming Rue was smug for days, until she heard how vicious the Bienrong king was. She fainted on the spot from fear. The emperor was furious. A few days later, in front of the court, he told the envoy that Ming Rue was just a mere dancer, not fit for a royal marriage. He promised to send a true princess, along with a dowry of 10 million taels of gold.
I thought he meant me.
But when the decree came, the chosen bride was none other than the low-profile, nearly invisible third princess, Wen Yuan. I was stunned. It didn't make sense. Why not send me? Even if Wen Yuan came from a lowly birth, she was still his real daughter. What could possibly make an emperor choose to spare me over his own blood? Later, I found out. The war at the border had intensified. But my brother, Yun Qianli, had led a string of victories and become a key military figure, the backbone of the army's morale. The national treasury was empty. There was no money to fund the army. The emperor had to borrow from wealthy merchants. Meanwhile, my parents had spent the past 6 months madly amassing wealth. Now, they were as rich as a nation. In short, I had a powerful backing. The emperor couldn't touch me. In fact, he had to keep me close.
10.
Not long after, the imperial decree officially conferred upon me the title of Princess Huarong. At the same time, the third princess, Wen Yuan, who was to be married off, was also granted honors and rewards. I ran into her once in the imperial garden before her departure. The timid, quiet girl from before had now been dressed in fine silks and styled into a true beauty. Seeing no one else around, I handed her a small bottle of medicine. Wen Yuan looked surprised. "What's this?" "A folk remedy from my hometown," I said. I heard the king of Bienrong has a violent temper. If he's in a rage, give him one of these. It might just work. In my past life, it was only after the sudden death of the Bienrong king that people learned he'd long suffered from severe migraines. It was the unbearable pain that triggered his rages. This medicine was something Yun Qianli had prepared for me, just in case. But since I wasn't the one going now, I had no use for it. Wen Yuan gently rubbed the bottle and smiled at me. You're not really a princess, are you? My breath caught. I looked at her warily. But she spoke casually like we were just chatting over tea. I knew the moment I saw you. Don't worry, Ming Rue isn't one either. Her words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I stared at her in shock. Wen Yuan giggled and leaned in to whisper in my ear. She looks more like Prince Huan, who was stripped of his title years ago. Lin Haidang had been gifted to the emperor by Prince Huan. Back then, she was the most favored performer in his household, but vanished during the succession battles. If what Wen Yuan said was true, then Lin Haitang's true allegiance was worth questioning. Up until now, my only goal had been survival. But thanks to my family's efforts, not only were we safe, we were powerful. So why not stir the pot and give everyone a little drama? Just then, word came that my brother had won yet another major victory. After the banquet, the emperor finally summoned me for a private audience. He got straight to the point. Why did you impersonate my daughter? Do you know that's a capital crime? I didn't even blink. Is your majesty going to execute me? With enemies outside and unrest inside the court, the emperor relied entirely on my family now. Of course, he wouldn't dare touch me. Seeing I wasn't cowed, his tone softened. I just want to know why. What did Ming Rue do to deserve this? I said nothing, but as I recalled everything from my past life, I could still feel the pain on my body, the agony of being tortured, flayed alive, the suffering worse than death. Ming Rue was the executioner, but the emperor, who indulged and enabled her, was no less guilty. Instead of answering, I asked him, Your Majesty, how did you come to believe Ming Rue was your real daughter? At that, the emperor's face relaxed slightly. It was clear he was fond of Ming Rue and spoke with pride. Her features resemble mine. If you look closely, her irises carry a blue-black tint, exactly like mine. Anything else can be faked, but eye color, that's inherited through blood. I feigned sudden realization. So that's it. Royal blood, indeed. I'd heard that Prince Huan also had eyes like that, blue-black, just like your Majesty's. The emperor stiffened. His expression changed instantly. Prince Huan had died a traitor. His name was taboo in the palace. Mentioning it was punishable by death. But I wasn't afraid anymore. It felt good to use power, to even toy with the emperor himself. He was naturally suspicious. And with that one line, I had planted the seed of doubt. He would inevitably begin to question Prince Huan's connection to Lin Haidang, and in turn, the truth behind Ming Rue's identity. 11. The emperor began quietly digging into the past. Meanwhile, Ming Rue was nearly losing her mind inside the Imperial Music Bureau. After the emperor publicly declared her just a dancer, he had her sent to the palace department where performers were trained. And when she heard that I'd been formally named Princess Huarong, she was like an ant on a hot pan. She couldn't understand it. She danced her mother's original choreography, proved herself as the only heir to that legacy. So, why wouldn't the emperor acknowledge her? Was it because she didn't have enough proof? Desperate, she suddenly thought of one final, irrefutable piece of evidence. She spent every coin she had to send someone to the north and retrieve a painting. At a family banquet, while the emperor absent-mindedly picked at his food, and I chatted politely with the empresses and other princesses, Ming Rue burst in, holding a scroll. Father, look. This is the painting my mother clung to until the day she died. She said this was my father. Look, it's you. Right there. In front of everyone, she unfurled the scroll. The painting showed a young man, elegant and handsome, with regal features, clad in fine robes, sword dancing beneath a plum tree. His eyes, painted in a distinct shade of blue-black, were the focal point. The emperor's eyes widened as he stared. Then, Shaking with fury, he pointed at Ming Rue and roared, "Abomination!" A moment later, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. A joyous banquet was thrown into chaos, and the entire empire shifted overnight. Ming Rue had no idea that while the man in the painting did resemble the emperor in his youth, the emperor had never danced with a sword. That figure in the portrait was Prince Huan, the very same rebel whose name no one dared speak. And that painting proved everything. Lin Haidang had had a secret relationship with Prince Huan, and Ming Rue's bloodline was tainted. Even as she was dragged off to prison, she still screamed, "I'm the princess. I'm the emperor's daughter." The emperor, overwhelmed with rage, suffered a relapse of an old illness. It struck fast and hard, leaving him bedridden. Even with the best medicine from the imperial physicians, he was beyond saving. During this time, the third princess Wen Yuan returned from Bianrong and assumed authority, staying by his bedside. Everyone had thought she would die in Bianrong. But not only did she survive, she won the Bianrong king's heart, gained control of his military, and became the most powerful princess in court. Suddenly, everyone wanted to curry favor with her. But she saw no one. Instead, she came straight to me. I hadn't seen her in a long time. She seemed like a different person now, radiant and reborn. "That medicine you gave me, it worked wonders," she said. "The Bianrong king's migraines are almost gone. Because of that, he trusts me completely. He's even grown dependent on the pills. Could you make more?" I shook my head. She hesitated. "You can't." "I can give you the recipe," I said. "You can make as much as you want." She blinked, then burst out laughing. "Let me think, such a big favor. What kind of gift should I give you in return?"
12.
A month later, the emperor passed away. In his final moments, he drafted a secret edict ordering Ming Rue to be buried with him. This didn't surprise me. He had never truly cared for Ming Rue as a daughter. All his affection stemmed from his feelings for Lin Haidang. But once he discovered that the woman he loved hadn't loved him back, and that the daughter she bore wasn't his, a proud emperor could only feel shame. He would have flayed her alive if he could. There was no way he would allow her to keep living. Later, I got a chance to see the real edict. It didn't just name Ming Rue. I was listed too. The emperor said that someone like me, if left alive, would one day become a threat. Once the war stabilized and the Yun family was no longer useful, he intended to have me killed. But Wen Yuan, in front of all the court officials, swapped the edict with her own. And with the power she held, no one dared question her. That was her gift to me in return. Before the emperor's burial, I went to the prison to see Ming Rue one last time. She was haggard, her hair disheveled, muttering the same thing over and over. "I'm a princess. I'm a noble princess. How did it come to this?" In her mind, she was the emperor's true-born daughter. But I had stolen her identity. Everyone believed me. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't prove otherwise. That sense of helplessness, of complete despair, had driven her to the brink of madness. She couldn't understand why no one believed her, why the emperor didn't acknowledge her, and why I, Yun Jiangrong, who had once treated her so kindly, would now treat her this way. The moment she saw me, she lunged like a beast, as if she wanted to tear a chunk of flesh from my body. "Why? Why did you do this to me?" I looked at her calmly and said, "Ming Rue, if you had become a princess after rescuing the emperor that day, what would you have done to the Yun family?" She looked confused and faltered. You saved me, of course I would have repaid your kindness." I almost laughed. "No, you wouldn't. You would have schemed to seize our family's wealth, force my parents into hard labor, broken my brother's spirit, and sent him to the eunuch chambers, and kept me by your side to torment me day after day." Ming Rue froze. She stared at me in disbelief. It was as if I'd exposed the darkest part of her soul. Ashamed and furious, she screamed, "You're lying. You made all of that up." "I never did any of that." I leaned in and whispered in her ear, "I lived through it, Ming Rue. This is what you owe the Yun family. You are not innocent." Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, Ming Rui's howls turned hysterical. She begged me to save her, but I never looked back, not once. 13. There's a secret that probably no one knows. Much later, I learned something astonishing. Ming Rui was born 10 months after Lin Haidang fled Prince Huan's manor, meaning she had conceived the child before she left. The painting that Lin Haidang had so dearly treasured. It was from a family banquet. The late emperor had ordered his sons to perform sword dances for entertainment. Prince Huan was gifted with a blade, but the current emperor had no such skill. So, to avoid displeasing his father, he merely flailed the sword around under a plum tree. According to one of the old eunuchs who is still alive, the emperor had stood right beneath that tree. So whether the man in the painting was Prince Huan or the emperor, only Lin Haiding knew, and only she knew whom she truly loved. After telling me this, the old eunuch passed away. No one else in this world cared about the love and hatred of the dead anymore. And frankly, neither did I. After the emperor's death, when Yuan served as regent, there were even rumors that she had her sights set on the throne herself, but that would take time. She granted me a vast fiefdom. They said it faced the sea, with spring blossoms all year round. I couldn't wait to leave. Together with my parents and brother, and a fortune in gold, we packed up and moved out. As for this wretched place, I wouldn't spend even one more day here. The end.